Live from Flagler County, welcome to Best Picture This, where it is always Oscar season. I'm Mike.
And I'm Brian. In this show, we reevaluate every Best Picture nominee from the 21st century and any other movie that we want.
Any movie that we want. That's right. It's like the Wild West on this show, Brian. We can cover anything we want. Who's going to stop us?
Nobody. We have our own protective posse around us, apparently.
It's a lawless world out here in podcast land. But our movie today, like you said, is News of the World, starring Tom Hanks and directed by Paul Greengrass. You may know Greengrass from making 3 of the Jason Bourne movies and Captain Phillips with a bunch of others. But News of the World is the first in the summer series being presented by the Flagler County Public Library. And like you said, they can't do much to promote. So we're kind of stepping in, trying to help out the library because we both love it. We rent a ton of movies from there and sometimes some books.
Occasionally.
Every now and then. So if you want to watch this movie for free at the library, it's showing at 1 p.m. next Friday, May 7th. Other movies coming up between now and July include the live-action Mulan remake that's going to be coming up on this show as well. Also, Tenet, Christopher Nolan's new one. Greenland, The Mauritanian, which I've never heard of. I'm excited to check that out. And The Courier.
Very good. Also, if you want to sponsor this series that we're doing on the Palm Coast Observer's Facebook page and on the YouTube page, then let us know. You can contact the Palm Coast Observer to buy a sponsorship and advertise, and we'll talk about how great your business is on future episodes.
But now, News of the World. Let's watch the trailer, Brian.
Yeah, let's check out the trailer. Hopefully this works. If it doesn't, then let us know in the comments if this is not working, and we'll just kill it. But I think it'll work. So we'll hit play, and then we'll step out of the stream here for a second.
Let's do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Captain Jefferson Kyle Kidd, and I'm here tonight to read the news from across this great world of ours.
So they pay you to tell stories. I ain't never heard of that as a thing a man can do.
Well, it's not a rich man's occupation, as you can see.
Halt! Stop! Stop! I'm not gonna hurt you!
Do you understand English?
Dog jeg cowbot og...
Friend. Says your name is Johanna Leonberger. Indians took you when they attacked your family 6 years prior. The mother, father, and sister were... well, they passed. She's got family down in Castroville.
Captain, why are you doing this?
She needs to laugh and dream. She needs new memories.
Road's closed.
Is that the law?
It is now.
Captain, you, Johanna. I do not have a clue as to the care of a child. It's a photograph. That's my wife. You can certainly handle a horse. Right there's a horse.
Horse. Captain.
Captain. Make no mistake. Captain.
Word is she's that captive out of Wichita Falls.
What do you want?
How much you want for her?
This child is not for sale.
So she thinks she's an Indian now.
She's something in between. Ladies and gentlemen, these are stories of men and women very much like you, waiting for better days to come.
You can't have her! And I'm taking her home!
Tom Hanks just doing Tom Hanks things in this one, carrying that trailer.
Yeah, Tom Hanks, he can carry any trailer, right? He actually didn't do many, he hasn't done too many Westerns, so it's interesting to see him pull it off. You look good in a cowboy hat. You see a lot of the familiar kind of scenes of Westerns, you know, people in mountains shooting downhill at their charging bad guys coming up.
Yeah.
But
I might talk a little bit about that coming up.
Well,
Yeah.
about that. So this movie did receive 4 Oscar nominations: Best Original Score, Cinematography, Production Design, and Best Sound. The cinematographer is Darius Wolski. Paul Greengrass also was nominated for 1 Academy Award in the past. In 2007, he was nominated for Best Director for United 93. I did not see United 93. He was also nominated for a Golden Globe, Paul Greengrass was, for Captain Phillips with also Tom Hanks. I also wanted to bring up Helena Zengel. This little girl is like so good in this movie, and
she's really good.
She didn't receive any Oscar nominations, but she did receive a nomination for Best Supporting Actress at the Golden Globes and the Screen Actors Guild Awards.
Okay.
Also in Germany, she was in a movie called System Crasher in 2019, and at age 11, and won Best German Actress for that movie. So
Nice.
That's pretty amazing for 11-year-old. The movie got 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. And here's the consensus that it said: News of the World takes a slow but absorbing ride down a comfortingly familiar Western trail, guided by Tom Hanks in peak paternal mode. I thought that was a brilliant description of Tom Hanks, peak paternal mode.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
put a young kid, you know, in the movie with them, and it's going to be a great movie.
But also the fact that it is a slower movie, you know,
it is kind of slow.
So if you didn't have that presence kind of guiding you through, saying, just wait it out, it's going to be worth it. Maybe it doesn't work so well. I don't know.
Because you can trust Tom Hanks.
You can trust Tom Hanks. He's the most trustable man in America.
He very well might be. So coming up in this episode of Best Picture This, brought to you specially by the Palm Coast Observer, of which I'm the editor, by the way, if anybody didn't know that. And Mike is an alumnus of the Observer family. Coming up in this show, we'll do our Farley Awards. Mike and I will give our most awesome moment of the movie. We'll also give a golden take, and we will ask each other a special question that is designed to ride the wagon of truth through the wilderness of ignorance. We'll also imagine what might have been in this movie, because there was other scenarios that could have happened. And then we'll talk trivia, and we won't do our big reveal, keep it or kick it, because that's not what we're doing on this show. But typically when we do Best Picture This, we say this movie should be in the Oscar 5 or it should not. And then we kind of reevaluate every other movie that year that was an Oscar. So Farley Awards.
Our Farley Awards for the most awesome moment of the movie. And for me, this is a movie that works hard to make us think about the power of news, stories, truth. But its best moment, Brian, is just a good old-fashioned action scene. So the scene starts with Hanks being confronted by these 3 ex-Confederate soldiers, and we saw it in the trailer. They ask to buy the girl. Hanks says no. They get mad. And when he leaves, they chase him. That's the setup. But this action is so good because it's not like your typical fast-paced action where, I mean, there's a horse chase. I don't want to say that. And there is shooting also. But at its best, it's the quiet moments of suspense. You know, it just makes you feel the tension. So like when Hanks's wagon wheel gets stuck on some rocks and he has to get out and he has to push the wagon while these horses are approaching, or when he retreats to high ground, like you mentioned earlier, and there's this standoff where they each try to figure out where the other one is kind of hiding behind these rocks. So, I mean, I could say that I like the scene so much because it messes with our expectations of like what a traditional action sequence should be, especially because Greengrass directed it and he's the Jason Bourne guy, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm going to resist intellectualizing it, Brian, because the scene just works because it's fun. You know, it raises the stakes of the movie, and those reactions when a scene is just fun and tense and suspenseful, that's emotion, you know, that's visceral. So I don't want to muddy it up with, you know, what's going on up here.
You don't want to think too hard about movies. Is that what you're trying to say, Mike?
I'm not trying to say that. I'm all for being hard on movies and holding them accountable. But a scene like this, a good action scene, makes you care about every moment. You know, makes you care about every movement. Is the bad guy going to find out where the good guy is? Because when he walks on this rock, a little bit of dust goes through the cracks where he's hiding. You know, little things like that just tell a big story. And then hopefully at the end of it, you care more about the characters. I mean, that's the power of a good action scene. And I think that Greengrass nails it with this one.
I actually think that his best action moment is just the moment when Tom Hanks sees the girl. This is very early on. It's like 5 minutes into the movie, so we're not giving anything away. But when he meets Helena Zengel, I can't remember her last name though.
Yeah,
I think we're gonna hear her name a lot in the next decade or so. But he, Tom Hanks is just standing there, and he realizes there's somebody over in the woods, and you get this shot that's like, there's like 4 or 5 different shots that are less than a second each, and just kind of like quick turn. You see his hat, and you see his turn his head, and then he starts running, handheld camera, there. That kind of made me think, okay, this is like a Jason Bourne moment, in this movie. It's not typically a Jason Bourne style movie, though. It's very peaceful in a lot of ways, and that's my Farley Award for this movie. The most awesome moment to me are the moments that are at dawn and dusk.
Yes,
the peaceful moments there, you just feel it. It's like you can like breathe easy, because it captures the moment on the prairie. When there is no danger, you're just seeing the sun go down, and it's just thinking about. It's very contemplative, and it feels like it's a totally different world, which I think is true to life when you're in dawn and dusk. Like, I think that's why there's this awe about those moments outside when you just walk out into the, in your driveway, you're coming home or something, and it's dusk. I kind of linger out there sometimes, so maybe it's kind of personal, maybe I'm saying more about my personal
hey, no, I'm with you, because to your point, right after that action scene that I was describing, we get this very short scene of him and Johanna kind of sitting in the prairie alone, and it's quiet, and the sun is going down. And I swear, some of these shots felt like they were straight out of Nomadland. Just this kind of appreciation of the sky and of nature, and the sky being so big in the frame to kind of highlight the fact that these people are sort of lost in and a part of this, giant wild world. It's great stuff. And it's great to see that kind of art house thing mixed with the more, popcorny action scenes like you're mentioning.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of reminded me, actually, we just did on our podcast, Lord of the Rings Fellowship and Lord of the Rings Two Towers, and you have Peter Jackson doing the big sweeping scenes in New Zealand. I thought about those scenes in the Western United States. And kind of like, sometimes just putting the camera on it and at dusk, and you realize that this is just as majestic as those mountains in New Zealand in that movie, just different. It's kind of like the awe of the world, which is, I think it captures it really well. So Mark Kermode of The Observer, not the Palm Coast Observer. I imagine I don't even know which Observer this is, but there's other ones around the world. He wrote, quote, "Having emerged from news documentaries," which is what Paul Greengrass did initially, "to become a peerless director of vivid real-life dramas, for example, Bloody Sunday and United 93, and a peerless director of frenetically visceral adventures like the Bourne franchise, Greengrass relishes the opportunity to take a more languorous attitude to character development and location." And I kind of got the feeling with this movie, like Paul Greengrass is saying, like, okay, I did all that stuff. Now I want to do like the location. I want this to be a movie about a place too. That's pretty cool. The cinematographer,
and it just subverts expectations, because you go into something like this thinking he's making a Western, there's going to be these gunfights. And like I said, there are gunfights, but the parts that you care most about are those quiet moments in between the shots. It's not the gun battle itself.
So I looked up a little bit about the cinematographer. His name is Dariusz Wolski. He's Polish, and he moved to the United States in 1979. And he hung out there. He didn't go to Columbia, but he hung out and around Columbia, thinking that New York was kind of the place to be for film at that time. And he started working on student films with other students. And he made a lot of music videos, just like we talked about a lot of cinematographers. Yeah. And he eventually went on to get a break, and he shot the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So another kind of action-y kind of guy doing this. He's done dozens of movies, and he's also going to do a couple of Ridley Scott movies coming up. So Golden Takes.
Yeah, before we move into Golden Takes, if you're just joining us, I'm Mike, he's Brian, and we're Best Picture This, a local movie podcast that's taken over the Palm Coast Observer account to talk about news of the world.
Hijacked.
which is playing for free next week at the Flagler County Public Library. And if you're a fan of movies or the Oscars, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And also follow our Facebook page. We always comment on there every time a new episode is dropped. So that'll keep you in the know.
Right on. You can also subscribe to the Palm Coast Observer's YouTube page to see the rest of this series at your leisure when it happens, which will be throughout, the next few months.
Yeah.
So golden take. What's your golden take, Mike?
So my golden take is that News of the World clarified for me why I love genre. It seems like genre is something that we kind of keep coming back to in this podcast.
Yep.
And watching this, it really made me think more about it. So this is a Western, and it's got a little bit of True Grit. It's got a little bit of The Searchers, and it's fully aware of those connections, right?
I thought about Stagecoach with those shots underneath where Tom Hanks is like on the blue screen and everybody's jostling around. I'm not giving away anything.
So yeah, but all of those connections and the fact that they're aware of them. But that made me think about my favorite Westerns, which I think are probably Unforgiven and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And those are two that are way more meta than this. Unforgiven in a way is kind of about Clint Eastwood's career, playing this cowboy character. And Liberty Valance is kind of about progress, not only for America, but also in our views of the male ideal, sort of as seen through leading men in movies. I don't know if you've seen this, but John Wayne plays this sort of old world tough guy, and he's that archetype. And then Jimmy Stewart plays the other lead, and he plays this like new world intellectual, a very different, kind of man.
Sort of like you.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know who the tough guy is between us, but the movie
I figure I'm kind of the John Wayne, but
yeah, for sure. The movie though is wrestling with where that John Wayne character fits in this new world. And I don't know. I don't think that dramas can do that as a rule, because I think about horror, especially, that I'm a horror guy.
Mm-hmm.
And within horror, there are so many great, like very specific subgenres. You have zombie movies, you have vampires, you have haunted houses, whatever. But that means that each new release is like automatically steeped in the history of everything that came before it within that subgenre. So you can use shorthand, right? And just like in Westerns, it doesn't matter if John Wayne plays kind of the same character in every role. And it doesn't matter if this plot feels familiar to the Searchers and to True Grit, because it matters only what you do with that familiarity. And I don't know if that's something that comes so easy to a drama that's kind of each new one sort of is existing in a vacuum, right?
I thought a lot about this. Another Western, I guess you would call it a Western, There Will Be Blood. It seemed like sort of the evil twin of this movie, with Daniel Day-Lewis being a not quite as peak paternal sort of a dad, and but he's got a young kid and bringing him around the country and things like that. I thought that was kind of an interesting. There's a couple scenes that reminded me a lot of There Will Be Blood, which we'll talk about in several months for our 2007 or 8 season.
Yeah. So just to wrap up this whole genre thing, I just think that it's really cool that within genre, these directors can kind of reference what we know about these actors, what we know about their characters, what we know about all of these familiar narratives in a way to create something new. And this is going to sound pretentious probably, which I'm fine with, Brian.
Yeah, you're great at pretension.
I'm great at it. I've mastered it. But that push and pull, especially in horror, I've always kind of seen as like similar to jazz, because you're taking this thing that exists, you're probably using a lot of the traditions that it was built on, but you're reinventing them and you're adding inventions and commentary, and that makes this brand new thing. And I don't know, I just think that all art is better in context like that, and you don't get that any better than in genre.
I think recognizing that the art it doesn't exist in a vacuum, just like you basically are saying, but
yeah,
it's kind of like self-consciously bringing in that history, welcoming it into it, instead of trying to like defeat it or supersede it. And I think that's kind of a generous kind of a tone that some filmmakers seem to make in genre movies.
Yeah, for sure.
So my golden take is that in a love story or a buddy story, which this really is a buddy story, Tom Hanks and Helena Zengel, there's really only 2 different types of buddy stories. There's one where the 2 guys get along perfectly from the beginning, like, for example, us, but they're separated by this obstacle. For example, for us, it's this blue line that separates us.
Yeah,
I'm just improvising right now. This is not part of my notes.
Oh, it's gold. Yeah, keep down this road. It's going great.
But either the two characters are totally tight and friends and love each other from the beginning, and they're separated by some other force, like a natural disaster or time or death or something like that. There's that type. And then the story is about how they overcome it. And then the second type of buddy story is where they meet each other and they hate each other from the beginning. And the story is all about, that the two buddies, or the two, the man and the woman, or whoever it's going to be, the two love interests, they're going to eventually fall in love. And the story is, how is it going to happen? And I thought this was an interesting take on those two classifications, because Tom Hanks can't really figure out what he wants to do with this girl. He meets her in the forest in the 5th minute of the movie, and you think, like, does he have a responsibility to do something to help her? Is he going to kind of like dedicate the rest of his life to like finding where she's supposed to be? It's not immediately like they love each other. They're friends they're buddies from the beginning. But he also doesn't really like hate her exactly. I mean, she's wild, she's uncooperative. But of course, Tom Hanks is incapable of hating anybody, so we wouldn't believe that anyway. But he feels responsibility for her, which I guess which is why he's a lovable character to begin with. But I think that instead of anyway, it kind of changes those expectations for me. It did, at least. I was kind of thinking, it made me instead ask a question like, what would happen if this happened to me? What would I do? And I think that's pretty powerful when a movie can do that and put yourself in that movie, but put yourself in the shoes of the character like that.
Yeah, we don't want to throw any spoilers in here, so we're gonna avoid that. But I will say that we learn a piece of information about Hanks's character later on in the movie that informs this whole relationship. And where you're saying that maybe he likes her, he doesn't like her, I think it's more that he's drawn to having that responsibility. He's drawn to being responsible for something, but at the same time he's pushing against that, because that could be hard and that could be painful.
Tom Hanks likes peak paternal mode, I think, is the moral of the story here.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So let's go on to our questions. It's where we ask each other one question designed to get each other into peak paternal mode. So my question is this. The Kiowa tribe member Dorothy Whitehorse coached Helena Zengel in the Kiowa language, so it would sound more legit. And there's other details of Native American life and behavior. And a tribal chairman, when this movie was made, Matthew Comalty, praised the film crew's attention to accuracy. So my question to you is, we've talked about this on different podcasts. You have said that you don't care if a movie is true to life, like that this battle happened in this year or something.
Yep.
But what about like things like authenticity of a culture like this? Like, does it matter to you that whether you notice it at the time, I don't know, but if after the fact you learn that it gives a big thumbs up from the Kiowa tribe members that it was accurate and they appreciated how she was portrayed, does that matter to you?
It does. It matters more than
plot points,
timelines, stuff like that. And this is more of a sort of I care because they care thing, but also it's that that culture has been represented so badly in Westerns for so long.
That's really true.
And, just the white people making those movies don't care at all about the representation. The movie's about John Wayne, right? It's not about them. So yeah, it kind of feels like it's time to maybe think about the other side of the coin and, give people a real identity rather than just, this sort of this cliche that's kind of repeated over and over again in film. So something like this, yes, I will say that I agree more with you that facts matter.
Bending on the facts point.
I'm bending a little bit on the facts point.
I'm going to sneak in another question.
Okay.
Even though I'm only allowed one question on the show, but I'm going to ask one more.
That
is, this is only the second Western role for Tom Hanks. What is the first?
It's
a little It's a little tiny bit of a trick question, I have to say.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. What is it?
He plays a sheriff.
Plays a sheriff. Oh, you're talking about Woody in Toy Story. Come on.
That's a Western role. That is a Western role. So which role is better, Sheriff Woody or Tom Hanks as Captain Kidd?
Sheriff Woody.
Sheriff Woody's iconic.
Sure. I mean, you're not going to be. I mean, he had a snake in his boots for years, and he still entertained us. Great guy.
Indeed.
All right, my question for you,
question?
Brian. We're going to get into it on this one, so buckle in.
All right.
Linda Merrick of the Jewish Chronicle said, parallels are also to be drawn between the film's historical setting and the current socio-political landscape of a post-Trump era, where telling the truth and spreading it can be viewed as an act of unbridled heroism. And she is right. And I think that Greengrass highlights this fact from the very first scene, because the first time that we meet Hanks, well, after he's kind of getting ready for the day, you know, he's putting on his suit, he's shining his shoes or whatever. First lines of dialogue that we hear him say is he's reading the news to a group of people, and he tells them that a meningitis plague has just killed 97 people. And this room full of people all gasp. Yeah. And I think that it's pretty obvious that we're supposed to be thinking about COVID in this scene, and probably also how seldom it is that any of us gasp when we hear news about death or plague or whatever. So, Brian, as a newsman yourself, I was thinking about this, and it seemed too obvious to ignore. I thought you might have a unique perspective on this. So you famously love All the President's Men, and really any movie about journalists.
Spotlight is a great one.
Was Greengrass able to win you over with this one? And more importantly, did it make you think more about the role of maybe yourself and free press in modern America?
I thought that it was a metaphor for story more than it was really a metaphor or commentary about politics or about because I thought it was pretty cool that there's a bunch of discussion about story and the power of story. Yeah. And essentially the news become that's like, it's almost like the bedtime tales, the we're gathering around the campfire. That's kind of what's happening when Tom Hanks's character goes to these towns and reads the news to them.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. There's also a moment where, it kind of turns on its head. But I do really think that I actually read this book when it came out several years ago. And the thing that I remembered coming away from it was that there wasn't enough about the news, because I like the news.
More news forever. I get
More news forever is better. So, but I thought that actually the movie, and it's been a long time since I read the book. Paulette Giles wrote the book. But the movie, I thought, did a good job of making the news a part of the thread. It had its own kind of arc, and it was enough of a plot point that it felt justified instead of just sort of like, it was a weird job for him to have. I did think that the responsibility, or I guess the way that they seem to crave just facts about their world around them and about other people. They're so isolated in one city. They don't travel from city to city. They don't know. They can't just turn on the TV and find out what's happening across the state. And the fact that they kind of craved that, like it gave them human connections with people. I think that is a good thing about the news, that it can do. It kind of connects us as like a human family. It didn't really do much on the news as watchdog kind of idea that I think a lot of is more wrapped up in some of the politics of it. But
yeah, it doesn't go hard into that idea. But
no, and I think that's good. I really didn't want it to be about the politics. I mean, this is kind of, we've talked a lot about this. I'm more willing to go there than you are a lot of times. And this one, I was kind of glad that it didn't really seem like it was oppressively about, the news and, the value of the news.
Because that can get preachy. It could feel like the director is talking down to you.
It felt like it was really done in the service of the story, but it also it was kind of cool that the news was given a sort of a respect.
So I agree with you that the movie is about story, that's sort of its primary mission. But I don't think that the parallels to modern day are hidden at all. Like, we meet a character, Mr. Farley. He runs his own little town, and it doesn't seem like life is very good in this town. And we're supposed to see him as kind of a dictator, right? He even runs his own town paper, which is full of propaganda. And at one point, he tries to force Hanks to read sort of this like self-aggrandizing story about himself and the town to all of the people. Hanks doesn't say the words, but he basically calls this article fake news. He explains why he wants me to read this thing and it's a good story, but it's not news. And instead, he reads something that is news. Mm-hmm. But I mean, Mr. Farley is supposed to be Trump. I don't see how
I did not see it. I did not see it that way.
That did not come in your mind. Wow.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, I thought that was in the forefront for me, and it just highlighted to me that this movie's relationship with news is very complicated. And I think that that's good, that it's not just hitting that modern political climate button over and over again. Because on one hand, the news is kind of held to this high standard as a beacon of truth, right? But on the other end of the coin, it kind of also tells people what they don't want to hear sometimes. And we mentioned before, when Hanks is reading an article about new federal amendments that are coming down, and he's reading it to a room full of Texans who do not want to be in the union, this room erupts and they get angry, they start yelling, and they almost attack some policemen there because they represent this union. But at the same time, in sort of telling these federal stories, it does connect these townspeople to a greater whole, which is something they didn't have before. So I think that's on its mind a lot. I'm surprised that you didn't see those parallels as much. Maybe I'm making them up.
I think you're making them up. Maybe I'm just trying not to offend all of our Facebook fans who are Trump supporters, who will revolt. I don't know. No, but yeah, I kept just thinking of There Will Be Blood in those moments when he's there with all the people in the little shacks as he's reading the news.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to what might have been. Or no, we're supposed to plug the podcast and the show first.
Yeah. Before we get into what might have been, quick reminder to head over to Apple Podcasts, head over to Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our show, Best Picture This, where it's always Oscar season.
If you have a movie that you think is often overlooked in the Pantheon conversations, that was the great movie of that year, consider becoming a patron, and you can help choose a movie that we would do a podcast episode on. It won't be on this, it'll be just on our podcast, but check it out at patreon.com/bestpicturethis if you're interested in that. We have a couple coming up from patrons who have already taken us up on that. So what might have been? Tell me yes or no on the following. I think I might only have one thing. Yeah, I just have one thing.
Okay.
There's not a lot. I think Tom Hanks was pretty early on a pick. And I have some trivia after this. But A Man Called Ove, 2015 Swedish film. It was the highest grossing foreign film in the US in 2016. My question is, tell me yes or no, would you like that movie more if it had Tom Hanks in it?
I have not seen that movie.
Well, Mike, this is also a trick question because you're in luck, because that movie is about to be remade with Tom Hanks in the lead role, only like 6 or 7 years later, right? So what might have been, there's not a lot of these, what might have beens for this one. But my question is kind of a general question, not about this movie, but about remakes of movies, right? We're actually doing The Fly coming up as a bonus episode because our first patron selected it for us. Mm-hmm. That's a remake of a 1950s movie. But when a movie is remade, not even all that much longer afterward, yes or no? You like that? You don't like that?
I don't like it. I mean, I'm not going to rally against it. I feel like any new movie that comes out is a new chance for a great movie to come out. That usually is not the case, but what's the harm, really? And it's twofold with this, because remakes from older movies like The Fly, I think that's a perfect example of when remakes go really right, because you have this movie from the 50s and it's very, very 50s. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, but
I have not. Have you seen it?
I have. The special effects. What's that?
Vincent Price, right?
I think so. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But it's one of these things where, you have this like mad scientist, and the shots of him in his laboratory are like the most sort of quintessential shots of a guy in a mad scientist laboratory with the beakers and the random spinning wheels, things like that. And then Cronenberg's The Fly in the 80s is a completely different beast, where it's like a body horror movie that expands into, this love story. And it's not just about, how science can go wrong. Basically, there's other things going on. But then I think about something like Let the Right One In, a Swedish horror movie. And then I think 3 years later, a new one it came out that was called Let Me In. It was an American remake, and it was solid. It's not a bad movie, but it's kind of in that zone of sort of a shot for shot, except now it's in English. And I always wonder, I get it. People don't watch subtitled movies as much, not for good reason, but it's the way it is. So if you make a good movie in English, maybe people will watch it, but it's not something that excites me.
I recently watched Insomnia, Christopher Nolan movie that was a remake of a previous movie. And I chalked it up to, maybe that's why I didn't love it that much, because it was based on it was just a recent remake. British Office or American Office?
You have to say American Office.
Quick turnaround remake.
I love the British Office, but the British TV series are so short. You have a total of, I think, 13 episodes of that entire show. The Office in America was on for like 9 years.
Yeah.
So I got to go. Well, I'll throw in one more remake that I absolutely love. Okay. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is another one that was remade decades later. And it's a totally different film with a totally different aesthetic. And I love it. It's one of my favorite horrors.
Very good. All right, moving on to trivia. These are 5 points that I want to share with you that you can have a takeaway to wow your wife if she doesn't watch this episode.
Okay.
The first thing, Helena Zengel, when she was brought on to be this role, she had never heard of Tom Hanks.
Wow.
She said she thought she had seen Da Vinci Code, but she didn't really know who he was, or, it's pretty sad if that's like your sort of introduction.
That's the only Hanks that you've seen. Like, is that guy actually good?
Isn't that the guy in Da Vinci Code? The second thing is Paul Greengrass said, he told the New York Times in 2020 that this is the first film I made with a child actor at the heart of it. And he thought it would be very difficult. But as soon as he saw Helena Zengel's audition, he said that was the only person he even looked at. It was the easiest decision in the film. And I'm really excited to see someone who's that young, who can be that convincing, because so many child actors have ruined good movies.
I mean, you famously hate child actors. You love children, but you hate child actors.
I don't know that I hate their acting. I don't hate the actors, but I hate their acting.
I agree for the most part, but then there are exceptions. There are Haley Joel Osment in The Sixth Sense.
A few.
And give it up for him.
All right, number 3, Paul Greengrass. He co-wrote as a ghost author a book called The Spy Catcher. And it was like infamous. It gave away like all these secrets about MI5, British Secret Service, and it was banned in the 80s. So that's pretty cool about Paul Greengrass.
Rebel. Okay.
Okay, number 4. Paul Greengrass is also known for his handheld camera work. So the question is, how did he develop this style? And he said, to be perfectly honest, I couldn't afford tripods. That's how it was when he was younger, making his movies. So
wow. Sometimes
necessity is the mother of invention, which is another thing that I really love from looking at some David Lynch interviews. Because he said the same thing. Like, sometimes you got this big budget and you do the easy thing because that's what you got the money for.
Yeah.
But when you have no money, sometimes you do unusual creative things, like maybe you run around with a handheld camera in different ways because that's what you can do. Okay, so number 5 is there is an upcoming Tom Hanks movie about Elvis Presley, directed by Baz Luhrmann, who also did Moulin Rouge and lots of other.
So that's going to be a glitzy, bright, loud one.
However, just so you know, he's not playing Elvis Presley, so that's a good thing, because I think that's a little much. So, would you consider Tom Hanks being in another Elvis movie, Forrest Gump, since Elvis stayed in the house where I lived?
No.
Is
He
that an
loves
Elvis
asking
movie?
me if something is a certain kind of movie. If there's only like a second of that thing, no, Forrest Gump is not an Elvis movie.
All right, so
I've
that
got
is
a couple trivia points for you
okay. Go
before we
ahead.
move
Yeah,
on here.
let's hear
So
'em.
Paul Greengrass, I thought you'd appreciate this, is working on an adaptation of George Orwell's 1984.
Really?
That is his
Cool.
next upcoming project. But
Didn't
I
know
just
that.
wanted to talk about box office here for a little bit because
Okay.
I think it's a very timely subject right now. So the budget for News of the World was $38 million. The worldwide gross was 12.7 million. That is really low. That's really low. But it's also
Especially
hard
for
to.
Tom
What's
Hanks
that?
for a Tom Hanks blockbuster. Yes.
Yeah, so it's crazy low, but at the same time, it's very hard to put that in context because 2020 was just such a weird year for movies, right? Because of the pandemic. So I looked at some other Oscar contenders from the year to kind of compare. Promising Young Woman made 13.3 million, so about the same. Minari, 11.1. The Father, only 3.9. Judas and the Black Messiah, only 6.1. And Nomadland, the Best Picture winner, made only 5.5. So then you have Sound of Metal, you have Mank, you have Trial of the Chicago 7, and all of those just came out on streaming exclusively. So I have no way of even looking how much they made. But for even more perspective, Brian, this is where it gets good. Parasite, which won Best Picture last year, earned almost $259 million at the box office.
Worldwide.
$259 million. Nomadland made 5. So I think that is partly a function of different kinds of movies came out this year. You know, studios knew that if people are not going to be able to see a movie in theater, maybe we hold the movie that's meant to be a theater event, you know, like Joker also came out last year, made over $1 billion. But I think it's also a reminder that theaters are really struggling right now. And it was a reminder to me of how much I look forward to getting back into them.
I think Joker only costs about $60 million to make. I could be wrong on that, but that's pretty good. Pretty good return.
It's a good ratio. Yeah.
Yeah,
over
pretty
$1
good.
billion.
We should get into that business. Maybe we should,
This is our highway there.
maybe we should
We
quit
start with the
broadcasting
podcast.
and make a movie for $60 million. See what we can do with it.
I think so.
All right. Remember, News of the World is playing for free at the Flagler County Public Library, 1 p.m. next Friday, May 7th. Somebody in the comments, Elliot Adams, thank you for joining us. If you're still there, great. But we will put the list of the rest of the movies and the times in there as you requested in a comment. And throughout the summer, we'll be broadcasting more live episodes on some of the movies shown at the library and throughout Flagler County. For example, Sonic the Hedgehog is being played by the city. So we're going to check out their movies and do some on them. Live action Mulan and Tenet are coming along at the library. Plus, you can find the full catalog of what we've done so far with 25 episodes covering movies from 99, 2000, 2001 on Apple, Spotify, and you can check out bestpicturethis.com.
That's true. You could also find us on Stitcher or by telling your smart speaker to, hey, whatever, hey, Alexa, okay, Google, play Best Picture This, and we will pop up. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at Best Picture This. Head over there and give us a follow. And every time we drop a new episode, we post about it. And then when we're not posting about new episodes, we're talking about other movies that came out in the year and trying to figure out, you know, why certain movies got nominated, why others didn't, and what we like.
The Palm Coast Observer has a YouTube page. This episode will be put on there as well as other future episodes for the movies at the library. And also we have a show called Observations, which is interviews with local newsmakers. So make sure to go and subscribe to the Palm Coast Observer's YouTube page. Also, if there's a movie that you love that you're talking to your friends and you're trying to convince them that this is really one of the greats and they're not listening to you and no one's listening to you, we will listen to you. We want to know what you think is a great movie that has been overlooked or maybe doesn't get all the love that it should, or just a movie you think would be fun to have a conversation about like this with us. So go to patreon.com/bestpicturethis, become a patron, and you can help pick a future bonus episode. For example, David Cronenberg's The Fly from 1986 was chosen by Chris from Tampa, our first patron, and we have another one coming up that we'll be announcing soon.
And they don't need to be Oscar-y movies, you know,
No,
they don't need to be classy. If you love it, then that is all that matters. I had a friend, I remember once we were all hanging out, and he was very passionately trying to convince us that the movie Ghost Ship, I don't know if you remember Ghost Ship from the early 2000s, was like this great movie. I rewatched it. I'm not so sure about that. But the point is, he got me to revisit something that he loved. And sometimes you really strike gold with those. So hit up our patreon.com if you want us to talk about something specific. And if you enjoyed what you heard here, please remember to subscribe to the show and throw us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And for 15 years, Brian, 15 years of movie reviews, insights, and golden takes from yours truly, head over to letterboxd.com. That's letterbox, no E, just xd.com, and search for me, Mike Cavalieri.
So thank you for joining us next time. Until next time, if you're going to read the newspaper, don't worry about the news of the world. All you really need is in Palm Coast at the Palm Coast Observer. So we're going to sign off. And if anybody wants to comment, we will stay on or check it later. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot.